There must be about a billion productivity apps, videos, and books out there. And I, for one, am a little bit ashamed to admit that I have spent hours, weeks, months, maybe even years of my life trying to figure out how to get more stuff done, and spending the time researching this stuff at the cost of actually doing it. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to condense everything I've learned about productivity down into a single short video so that you don't waste a bunch of time trying to figure out how to be more productive and can just actually get stuff done in the first place. In other words, my goal is to make this the last video you'll ever need to watch about productivity. For starters, what you need to understand is that the reason why it's so easy to spend the rest of your life learning about productivity is because most of what is written and created on the topic is just tactics, how to get things done. And tactics are going to change over time as technology evolves, as needs change. But there are certain underlying principles underneath these tactics that if you understand these principles, the tactics don't really matter anymore because you can apply these principles to whatever scenario that you're in. And those principles have not changed in decades, which is why despite all the videos and all the books that are out there, I'm going to argue that there are maybe 3 to 4 books that you could potentially read to learn everything you could possibly need to know about productivity. Those 4 books in no particular order are The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker, which is more than half a century old. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, Getting Things Done by David Allen, and The Pomodoro Technique by Francesco Cirillo, which isn't even a book, it's just a white paper. And frankly, you probably don't even need to read the white paper. You could just read a blog post about it. But I'm going to go one step further and make this even easier for you. I'm not even going to make you read those books. I'm just going to summarize for you what those basic principles are, and then you can apply them to your own workflow. So in all my years of reading and learning about productivity, I managed to boil everything I know down to 10 principles, and we're going to go through each of those principles in order right now. Principle number 1 is clear your mind. Clearing your mind leads to better results. And so one of the principles of productivity is you want to approach your work with as few distractions as possible. So if you think of something that you need to do, you need to find a way to get that out of your mind and into some sort of, we're going to call it a system, but really it could be anything, right? Get it out of your mind and write it on a to-do list, write it on an app in your phone, take a voice memo, whatever the case might be. The goal is anything that you realize that you need to do, you need to make sure that you're not keeping that in the back of your mind, because when you do go to get work done, if you're constantly thinking about everything else that you need to get done, you're not going to be effective or efficient. So instead of trying to figure out a way to memorize everything you need to do, you need a system that you can rely on that says everything that's important in my life that I need to get done needs to live somewhere. And the key here is that it needs to be as few places as possible. One of the big mistakes that a lot of people make when they first start getting into the world of productivity and trying to get better at capturing their thoughts is they capture their thoughts all over the place. So now they go from having a disorganized mind to having a disorganized office, phone, car, home office, whatever, right? Because if you're taking notes down on your sticky pad, on your phone, on your, on your whiteboard at work, whatever the case might be, if you've got things to do all over the place, that doesn't help you at all. So the goal here is whatever's in your mind, find a way to capture it in a single place that you're going to be able to refer to and say, okay, this is my Bible of stuff that I need to get done. Principle number 2 is you're never actually going to get to the end of your to-do list. There is a fantasy in the world of work where we think that if we create these beautifully tailored, customized to-do lists that have everything that we need to get done, there will come a moment where we finally cross that last thing off the list and we will be free. We will have freedom to do whatever we want. Well, unfortunately, it's a fantasy, it's a myth. You're never going to get to the bottom of your to-do list. As you're getting stuff done, the more stuff you do, the more stuff you realize you will have to do. And so it is one of those cruel jokes that the people who actually get the most amount of stuff done tend to actually end up with the most new stuff to do. So the better you get at getting stuff done, the more stuff you are going to have to get done. There is an old adage that says if you want something to get done, make sure you give it to a busy person. And in my experience, that couldn't be any closer to the truth. So just realize that you're never going to get to the end of your to-do list, and you need to get rid of that anxiety when you have things on that list of things that need to get done that just don't get crossed off, because they will never get crossed off. You will die with things left to do on your to-do list. It is guaranteed. If you had nothing to do, you would be bored out of your mind. Not out of my mind. You wouldn't be bored out of my mind. You'd be bored out of your mind, and you just would give up. You would have nothing left to do. I know people might believe that this is the end goal that they're searching for, a state where there is nothing to get done, but trust me, that is not what you want. That is when you start to lack purpose, and that is the point at which you really will start to fall into a depression. So realize that you're never going to get to the end of your to-do list, and be okay with that. One of the ways you can do this is have a to-do list that has every single thing that you need to get done, but then make yourself a separate list for a shorter period of time. So for today, for example, maybe you have your to-do list that has 200 items on it, but for today, you make yourself a separate list, which is much smaller and has 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 things on that list that today you want to get done. So even though you will never get to the end of your to-do list, it is possible to get to the end of your today list. And that is a feeling of satisfaction that you can carry over into the next day. Principle number 3 is don't confuse efficiency with effectiveness. Efficiency is how quickly you can get things done. Effectiveness is how well you get a job done and what things you are working on. So there is a great metaphor that I'd read once, and I think this might be in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I could be wrong about that. And the idea here is efficiency is the idea of being able to climb up a ladder really, really quickly. Effectiveness is knowing which wall to put that ladder up in the first place. So if your goal is to change a light bulb, you want to be as efficient as possible. You want to be able to get that ladder as quickly as you can. But if you lean the ladder against the wrong wall, you're going to be efficient in getting up the ladder, but you're not going to be very effective in changing the light bulb. So when you are trying to figure out a way to be more productive, remember that the goal here is not efficiency, it's effectiveness. It's not about getting more stuff done. It's about figuring out the right things that need to get done and getting those things done, even if you get fewer of them done. Principle number 4 is know your why. And this connects very closely with the previous principle, because if you know why you're doing something, then it will help you understand what you need to prioritize and what you need to do in order to be effective. In anything that you're doing, it is always a good idea for you to take a moment, pause, step back, and say, okay, why am I actually doing this stuff? If you take the time to do this, you will realize that there's a lot of things that you're doing that you probably don't actually need to be doing. And there is no better productivity secret than to stop doing stuff you don't actually have to be doing, because that is 0 effort and you get to cross a bunch of things off of your list and you never had to lift a finger. So knowing why you're doing stuff is really, really important. Now, I make this sound really simple, but it's not that simple, right? Because knowing your why is one of those questions that torments people all the time. In fact, why are we here is probably the single greatest question at the center of human existence. This video is not going to solve that question for you, but I do think it is worthwhile for you to take some time to figure out, why are you actually doing the things you're doing? If you are working on something because it is just something that you're used to doing, stop and ask yourself, is it actually still serving your purpose? If your goal is to achieve a specific career milestone, for example, is the work you're doing on a daily basis actually going to help you to achieve that? Or is it just stuff that you're doing because it's something that's expected of you? Ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself, why am I doing this stuff? Know why you're doing what you're doing. The first 4 principles that we just talked about, you could think of as the foundation of any person who is trying to be more productive. The next few principles I'm going to talk about are actually principles that apply to actually getting the work done. So principle number 5 is know the one thing that you're going to work on next. And the goal of knowing the next thing that you're going to work on is because it helps you to avoid that feeling of overwhelm. If you have no practice getting a lot of stuff done, then you probably are getting overwhelmed all the time. And like I mentioned in a previous principle, your to-do list is never going to end. So if you're waiting for the moment where it's like, oh, I can finally cross all these things down and I can focus on this one thing, that's never going to happen. And the further you go in life, the more things are going to get added onto your plate, the more responsibilities you'll have, the more roles you're going to be playing. And so you need to figure out, what is the one thing that I need to do next? and focus all of your attention on getting that thing done, and knowing that everything else that you need to get done is being safely stored in another place in your system because you have captured them based on principle number one. But what is the one single step that is the next step in accomplishing my goals? Know what that is, focus on that, get that thing done, and then ask yourself again the next question, which is, okay, that's done. What is the next thing I need to get done? This allows you to tackle any kind of problem, project, whatever, no matter how big, in a systematic fashion, and avoids you feeling overwhelmed. Principle number 6, aim for flow. Flow is that feeling that you get where everything just seems to be coming more easily. Athletes talk about being in the zone. Creatives talk about a state of flow. Regardless of what you call it, it's this feeling where suddenly everything just seems to be going so much easier, faster. Being in a state of flow is the closest thing any of us is probably ever going to experience to having superpowers. Because this is really the one and only way that I've ever found to actually get more stuff done in a shorter period of time, is to make sure that when I am working on that stuff, I am in a period of flow. To give you an idea of what this looks like, I've done a lot of writing in my career. On a good day, you could probably say that on average, I would be writing something like 200 words an hour. That's a pretty average day, I guess. In a state of flow, it is not unheard of for me to get to 1,000 words in an hour. So that's like 5 times the level of productivity. And the other thing is, when you're in a state of flow, everything's just kind of clicking, and it's not just 1,000 words of garbage that you would be producing. It's actually 1,000 words of quality stuff. So the question is, how do you actually get into a state of flow? And the simple answer is, flow is all about focus. So the enemy of flow is multitasking. There's a whole bunch of research that's been done about why multitasking is terrible for productivity. But to me, the single best argument for why you want to avoid multitasking is because multitasking prevents you from getting into a state of flow. If you're doing multiple things at a time, it's impossible to get into the zone on a single thing, which means you're never going to tap into that superpower. So avoid multitasking, get into a state of flow. Once you get into that state, you can get so much more done. And if you are focused on just the next action, it becomes a lot easier. Principle number 7 is to batch and schedule similar tasks together. The whole reason for doing this is essentially so that you can achieve that state of flow that we talked about in principle number 6. If you have a bunch of stuff that needs to get done that is sort of creative in nature, you might want to schedule all that stuff for the same day. If you've got a bunch of menial tasks that need to get done, errands, chores, that kind of thing, bundle all of those things together, because it allows your brain to kind of go into a specific mode and stay in that mode rather than switching back and forth and trying to change gears from, the barely on mode of doing laundry to the super active mode of writing a paper or writing a dissertation or preparing a huge presentation. The ability to batch things together means that you don't have to switch as much. And in the world of productivity, there's something that's known as the switching cost. When you are engaging the switching cost, this often happens when you're multitasking. Essentially, your brain needs to take a minute to get back into the mode that it was in to accomplish the specific task that it was doing. And if you're going back and forth between different types of tasks, you are going to be incurring that switching cost a bunch of times. Whereas if all of your tasks are similar, you don't need to switch the way your brain is operating. Principle number 8 is, if it's tiny, get it done. One of the biggest traps I've seen when people start to get into a mode of trying to be more effective and getting into productivity, and they start to take to heart this idea of capturing everything that needs to get done, is they will overdo it. They will over-index on capturing their thoughts, and they will start putting things like take out the trash on their to-do list, when in fact they could probably just grab their waste paper basket and bring it to the curb in under a minute. Or something like respond to an email goes on the to-do list when the actual response would probably take 30 seconds, so you might as well just get it over with now. The idea behind this is it allows you to avoid cluttering up your to-do list with all of these minor, unimportant tasks. And it also gives you a sense of momentum because you're getting things done quickly and you don't need to worry about them. You don't need to create the mental overhead of keeping those either in a system or in your brain or whatever. So if you have something tiny to do, if it takes The rule of thumb like to use is if it's going to take me less than a minute, I just get it over with on the spot. You might want to use 30 seconds. You might want to use 2 minutes, whatever rule of thumb you want to use. The idea here is if it's tiny, get it done. And the final set of principles is really about making sure that you can maintain this pace of getting stuff done. And it's not just one of those things where you're really, really effective for a couple of weeks and then you burn out, which is why principle number 9 is you absolutely need to make time to review. And reviews are something that no one likes to do because it feels like wasted effort. Why am I going to take 30 minutes to review what needs to get done when I could be spending that 30 minutes actually doing the stuff that needs to get done? The reason for this is because no matter how good your system is, it's always going to start to get a little bit frayed at the edges, and it needs a little bit of tidying up. And so a review can happen any number of ways. You can have a quick review at the end of the day, just looking at what you accomplished for the day and what you want to accomplish for the next day. That would be a daily review. That could take as little as 10 minutes, right? You could have a weekly review where you do the same thing, but you look at a longer time horizon. What did I get done in the past week versus what I hope to get done in that week? What does the next week look like? What do I want to get done in that week? And then scheduling the most important times so that I know exactly what needs to get done at what specific time. You could do a monthly review, which is just like a weekly review, but on a larger time scale. And then you can do longer horizon reviews like quarterly, biannual, annual reviews. And those ones start to get more into the less tactical, the less nitty-gritty of what are the actual things you're doing. But they start dealing more with the questions of what are the big goals that you're trying to achieve? What are the milestones you're trying to hit, right? And so having these scheduled review times is going to be helpful. Do you need a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual review? All of those things? Probably not. I personally like to do a weekly review and I do an annual review. Those are the two reviews that I use most often. When I'm particularly overwhelmed, when I've got a lot of things going on, I will usually start to add a daily review into my routine just because it helps me stay on top of things. But play around with this stuff. Just make sure you are taking the time to take stock of what actually needs to get done. And principle number 10 is schedule the important things. And when I say the important things, I don't mean the stuff that your boss asks you for. I don't mean that final project that is due next week that's worth 35% of your grade. When I say the important things, I mean those things that are really, really important to you. The reason why you're doing all this stuff in the first place. For me, the important things are my family, my close friends. Those are the important things. And I know that scheduling time for these things seems a little bit silly, but if you think about it, we take the time often to schedule the stuff that is not as important, the stuff that is going to allow us to, hopefully make a better life for ourselves so that hopefully we can take care of the people we love. Hopefully we have the time to spend with these people. But then the actual time that we spend doing the stuff that we want to be doing in the first place, that kind of gets pushed to the side and we say, oh, we'll do that whenever we get a chance. The whole thing is backwards. You should be scheduling the most important stuff first, and then the stuff that you are going to use to get there and the less important stuff, that is the stuff that you fit around it, right? And so if family is what is really important to you, at the beginning of every week, take some time to plan out when are you going to spend time with family, and during that time, do nothing but spend time with family. You want your schedule to work for you. You don't want to work for your schedule. And I'll give you a bonus principle here. And that bonus principle, I'm going to steal directly from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in that book, the 7th principle is called Sharpen the Saw. And I find this hilarious because every time I see someone talk about The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or really any really good book about productivity, I see them focus a lot on the parts of the book which will help you get more stuff done in the short term, but they always kind of gloss over the other stuff which is going to help you maintain this over the long term. And the reason that sharpening the saw is the 7th habit is because when Stephen Covey wrote this book, he wanted to make sure it was very clear that everything else, the other 6 habits of highly effective people that he put into his book, were useless if you don't actually sharpen the saw. So what does sharpening the saw means? It means taking care of your main tool, and your main tool is yourself, right? So there's that great apocryphal quote, which is attributed to Abraham Lincoln most of the time, which is, If I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend the first 5 hours sharpening my axe. But the idea here is if you keep wearing yourself down, if you are burning the candle at both edges, how many mixed metaphors can I throw in here? If you do all these things, you will never be able to keep up the pace of getting all of this stuff done. So you might be super efficient, super effective in the short term, but then you'll burn out and then you'll have to go through 2-3 years of recovery. But you need to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself does not need to be something that requires a ton of research, that requires a ton of work. It means making sure you're getting enough sleep. Most adults need somewhere between 7 and 8 hours. I know for a lot of people, that's not realistic. So, whatever you're getting now, just try and increase it little bit by little, right? Eat well. What does eat well mean? There's a million different diets out there. There's a million different people telling you what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. None of that really matters. As long as you can cut out the really bad stuff, you're already going to be doing yourself a big favor. And the third thing that you want to be doing in order to take care of yourself is keep your body moving. We get to a certain stage in life where, especially if you're doing the type of work which is, what's known as knowledge work, where you spend most of your day at a desk and the main thing that you're doing is thinking, is our bodies don't move as much. If your body breaks down, you only get one of them. So take care of your body, and that just means moving, right? Again, this is not about giving you exercise advice or fitness advice. But I think the thing that pretty much everyone can agree on is movement is a good thing. So if you spend all day sitting at a desk, every 20 to 30 minutes, get up, take a walk, get the blood flowing. Even if it's just for a couple of minutes, it's better than spending 8 hours straight sitting at a desk. Better than that, if you can go for longer walks every day, 30 minutes of exercise, even light exercise is a good thing. And then a few times a week, doing something a little bit more strenuous where you get your heart rate up. That's really all it takes. And if you do that, then you will be in much better shape to get more stuff done as time goes by. And that's pretty much it. If you follow these 10 principles and that one bonus principle, you will already be ahead of 99% of people when it comes to being more productive. You don't need to read any more books. You don't need to investigate any new systems. You don't need to download 1,000,001 apps. Just keep these principles in mind on a daily basis, and you will see that you are going to be getting better at getting stuff done. No question. Now, I said this is the last video you'll ever need on the topic of productivity, but because I know there's definitely a lot more room to explore some of these ideas, what I'm going to be doing is in the next few months, I'm going to be diving into each one of these principles in greater depth. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then I'd invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those videos. And in the meantime, I'll link a video here which will show you another skill that you probably should have learned in school but didn't.